Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is prepare your surface, and that means giving it a coat of gesso. Now, gesso is not white paint, it is very different, so don't use white paint to prepare your surface. Gesso is a chalk-based paint that provides a sealer and stops your paint from soaking down into what you're painting on, or vice versa. If you're painting on timber, it stops the colours and the tannins from the timber coming up into your paints. So you need to provide a surface to paint on, and as you can see from these pictures, it can also provide quite a textured surface for you to build up your own painting on top as well. So first step, prepare your surface using gesso. Okay, so you want to work backwards and forwards in a cross-hatching motion, and you can see I'm not using an awful lot of paint, it's not saturated, and I'm just kind of flippy-flopping backwards and forwards to get a crisscross textured effect on my surface. Now, depending upon what you're painting on, so if you're painting on raw fabric or on timber, you do want to do a couple of coats of this, okay? But most times, if you're just working on paper, a single coat will do the job. Okay, it dries really quickly, okay? Don't sort of do that. You can see I've just gone in the same direction. We want that texture and those marks there, okay? It means that the paint will stick to it much better. So when your gesso is dry, your next step is to do a colour wash, because it's often less daunting to work on a page that is not white. So you just want to use a neutral colour. This is a yellow oxide, but a pale blue-grey works nicely as well, and so does a warm red. So you've just got to think about what colours you're painting on top of it. So if you're doing light, pale colours, you want a fairly pale base. I'm using a wet brush, just grabbing a little bit of ink or colour, and I am just literally staining my page. Okay, and again, it's not a smooth painted finish, it's just textured and picking it up. Okay, so you can see that there's more texture coming through. You can see there's some hairs on here from my brush. Don't worry about them, it's all part and parcel of it. So complementary colours are opposite on the colour wheel, but a split complementary is one colour and the two colours either side of its complement. So if I get this little contraption that I made up, and you are welcome to use this. First off, look at your piece and go, okay, what is your favourite colour that you like? So I am going to blue-green. I always tend to go blue-green. They're my favourite. It is my favourite colour. I might mix it up. But if I go blue-green, I can see here that the two split complementaries that I'd use would be red and orange. Okay. If I was to say that lime green or yellow green is my favourite, and then I would use the red and the violet as my other complementary colours. Now, when I'm using these colours, I can use tints and shades of these. I'm not just limited to these versions of colours. Okay, so if I go back to the blue-green, for example, over here on my blue-green, I can use any of these tints and shades in my piece, and I will use all of these to do my sphere. Okay, so don't think that you're just limited by one colour. It's the tints and shades of those colours as well, and then it is also tints and shades of my orange and my red. Okay, now it is important to note though, if you're doing tints and shades of your orange, think about what orange you might use, because remember that if you use shades of the warmer colours or the tints of the warmer colours, they go an apricot colour. So the cooler version of the colours give you kind of a pure, more orange, pastel orange colour if you're adding white to those. So do be conscious of that, and that is when you want to look over at this side to decide, okay, the tints and shades versions that you want to use. Okay, back at my piece, what I'm doing is I am just drawing a horizon line on here, and I'm going to choose what colour I want to do my sphere and what colour I'm going to do my backgrounds. So I was going to do the blue-green sphere, and I'm using the oranges and the reds to do my background. So I am going to use a warm red to do my background. So I'm just putting out some warm red. I'm going to use a warm yellow as well. Okay, and I'm going to use a little bit of white at some stage. Okay, and then I'm going to just paint in my tabletop and my background. So my background, I'm going to do pretty strong colour. I'm just using a big brush because it's a big space. Okay, and once again, I'm kind of mixing my colours on my page. And you'll also notice that if you are using one of the big stiff handled brushes, so these timber handled brushes, that they leave brush strokes in your paint. So you've got to accept that if you're using that paintbrush. If you don't want those brush strokes, then you need to use your soft black handled brushes, okay? But again, use the biggest brush you can because this is a big space. Okay, so I'm just pulling in a little bit of orange in there just for a bit of variation in it. What I'll probably do is I'll probably dry that off and put a lighter colour again over the top of that. Okay, for my tabletop, I'm actually going to go an orange, and I've changed brushes. I'm using a soft brush this time. I want a nice sharp edge there, so you can see I've changed my angle of my brush. I'm going sideways to get the handle, so that bit there gives me a sharp edge. If I go like that, see how it sprays out and I don't get a sharp edge. So going along that way and bringing that down, and I'm going to use a bit more white. I've got a little bit of red on my brush there, so, but because I'm working in those tints and shades of those colours, I'm not too worried about that. Now the other thing to note too is because I was using a yellow, I've kept that undercolour, that ochre. Okay, if I had done a grey, I might have to do a couple of coats of the yellow because it's quite see-through. So I've hair dried this off, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a wash of a cool yellow over the top of this, and we'll just see what it looks like. So a wash is really watery, and so all I'm trying to do with it is to add a little bit of depth and interest and pick up some of those areas that I didn't do. So you can just see it looks a little bit more textured. If I put a little bit of white into it, so we're going to do like a pastel yellow. Okay, we can see that a bit more obviously. Okay, so I'm just going to cross hatch that in. Don't forget we're going to have a big ball in the middle of this, so we will cover most of that central part up. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to hair dry that off and then we'll get the sphere on there. Okay, so my background's dry as I put glue on it. I've done my sphere, I've drawn that on, and I've just traced around my tape. I've decided that my light source is coming from this way, so I'm going to have a shadow down here. And if you remember, my sphere is going to be blue-green. So I am looking at using all of these shades and tints in my sphere. Okay, so we start with our hue and then either swap to our shade or our tint, depending upon which way you want to work. So I've made up my blue-green. I'm going to darken it with a warm blue, and I've got my white as well. I could also use a yellow if I wanted to make it lighter instead of the white. So painting my sphere in. Okay, so I'm using curved strokes, and you can see I'm just working from the middle part. I'm getting a good amount of paint on my brush and then coming out to my edge. Okay, you don't want this paint to dry, so you do have to work pretty fast to do this. Now I'm not going to take the paint all the way up because I want white to come in there, so I'm going to bring that colour more down around. I'm going to pick up my blue and do my shadow. Curve strokes. Okay, just cleaning my brush off. I'm also going to use my blue and whatever's on my brush to add in my shadow, because it is going to be a same colour as my sphere. And I'm just using a dry brush to soften those edges. What you can do is you can repaint your tabletop and blend this together. Me personally, I like the dry brush effect, so I'm using a dry brush and just bring in a bit more shadow around there. Okay, I need to let that dry and do another layer on there, so we'll do that afterwards. Highlight, picking up some white paint, okay, and that's going into this section here. Okay, and again, I'm just now working that down because this will end up changing kind of the whole blue-green colour of my sphere as I need to work it in. Now, it takes kind of a lot to get a really smooth effect, and because acrylic paint dries so fast, you kind of get this lifting of paint. So it's not going to be a super smooth result, and it's okay, work with that. That's the nature of working with acrylic. Okay, but that's looking not too bad, okay? I could let that dry off a little bit, and again, use that idea of a dry brush, okay, and just sort of dabble some bits over there, and I can get lighter. Okay, if it was a nice shiny ball, I would have like a hard highlight through here. So I can put that in as well. See if this bottom bit is dry enough. And also just get a clean brush. Okay, it's not really dry enough. I can see it's still lifting up the paint underneath, but that's not too bad, okay? So the main part is playing around with that blending of colours and just trying to get that gradation of light through to dark as we go down through, okay? So keep working it and just keep remembering that you always follow the curves, okay? And having those loose brush strokes isn't such a big deal.